All right, Masechet Eruvin, Daf Yud 14. We start with a new Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Gimel. Basic topic tonight is going to be the different dimensions and some various scenarios of the placement and size and shape of the lehi and also of the korah. And we will also get a chance to calculate pi, as well as the ratio of the area of a circle inscribed inside a square compared to the ratio of the square.
Pi over 4.
What?
I think it's pi over 4.
We'll see. Okay.
Pi to 4.
All right. So a lot of interesting things. We begin. Let's define these terms. It is the word ariach and levena. Levena means a full brick, which is 3 by 3 tefachim. In other words, 9 by 9 inches. That's lebena. Ariach is half of that. Okay, so when you say a korah, that cross beam, it has to be thick enough that it can hold a half beam, a half brick. I'm sorry, not 3 by 3 hand breadths. In other words, right, which would be 1.5 hand breadths wide. Right, so that's how wide the korah has to be. And that's, there you go, it's half of 3 tefachim, 1.5 tefachim. But the crossbeam does not have to be the full width, but rather it can be only a tefach. Here was a nice picture. It can be just a tefach. Yeah, see that? And as long as the crossbeam is 1 tefach, then you can put on top of it a brick of 1.5. And it'll overlap on the side slightly, and that's okay. Good, that's halakha number 1. Not only does it have to be wide enough to hold a half brick, but also has to be strong enough that it can handle the weight of a half brick. The Yehuda says, oh no, it only has to be wide enough to hold a brick. It does not actually have to be strong enough to hold a brick. And this would explain why, if you made it out of straw, which is not sturdy at all, we imagine as if it's made out of metal, if that size and the shape would be able to hold a brick. If it were made out of metal, then it's okay, even if it's only made out of straw. So again, it's more about the visual, that it has to be like, look like it's sturdy, but not actually be sturdy according to the Yehuda. Akuma, the next halakha, it's not clear if it's only the opinion of the Yehuda. That's what the Talmud Yerushalmi says. But the Bavli seems to think that the next halachot are according to everyone. But either way, Akuma, rinota ki'ilu hi peshuta, if it's crooked, like something like this, right? Then we consider it as if it's straight. This looks like it's crooked, up and sideways. We'll see what the Talmud will discuss exactly. We look at it as if it's straight, a kind of legal fiction. Agula, if it's round, if it's a cylinder like this, then we consider it as if it's straight. And so how do you know if you have a rochab tefach, which is the minimum width? Well, it says you can measure the circumference, and as long as the circumference is 3 tefachim, then you know that the diameter is 1 tefach. So there you go. That's the measurement of pi in the Mishnah. It's not exact, but it's a rounded off, which is good enough for most purposes. All right, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara asks, Tefach? Tefach or machzeh b'hayeh? What do you mean? You said on one hand that the crossbeam has to be 1 tefach wide, but then you said it has to be able to hold a brick, half brick. Half brick is a tefach and a half. So which one is it? Kevan derachab lekabel tefach, idach chasi tefach, melaben lebetina, mashu mehagisa, vekayema. As long as it's wide, it's a tefach wide, then the rest of it you can just put cement, and it'll hang over a little bit on this side and a little bit on that side, and it'll be very stable. So that's all you need is 1 tefach to hold a tefach and a half. Amar Rav Huna korah shamru sricha sheteh b'ri'ah kedei lekabel ariach. ומעמידי קורה אינן צריכים שיהיו בריאים כדי לקבל קורה ואריח. So when you put this beam itself, according to the Biudao, says it has to be, no, it's correct, Tanakama, it has to be strong. The beam itself has to be strong, but the supports to the beam, let's say it wasn't resting on the wall, let's say it was supported by a bracket or something, right? The supports to the beam don't have to be that strong. In other words, it doesn't actually have to hold bricks. It's just that the beam itself has to be sturdy and big enough, but you don't need it to be supported so that it will do that. It's really a law in the actual material and size and shape of the crossbeam. No strings for this. No strings for this. Because this is for a mavoy, which is only one thing here or one thing there. Strings are a law in Surat HaPetach, right? A door frame. And that's a different law, right? Door frames actually can accomplish a lot more, and it needs more because it needs, 3 top and 2 sides. But that's correct. The top can be small. ורב חיסדא אמר, אחד זה ואחד זה צריכים שיהיו בריאים כדי לקבל קורה ואריח. This is Rabbi חיסדא disagrees and says no, the beam and the supports have to be strong enough to hold the beam, and it has to really be able to hold it, not only in imagination. But אמר רב ששת, הניח קורה על גבי מבוי ופרס עליה מחסלת והגביה מן הקרקע שלו שעה, קורה אין כאן, מחיסה אין כאן. So the case is, there's a picture of this. So imagine here, if you took this Quran and you hung a mat over it, and the mat went not all the way to the floor. There was a space of 3 tefachim from the floor to the mat. So he says this is no good, not at all, according to any definition. First of all, the mat covers the beam, so you can't see there's a beam there, so it's no good as a beam. Well, you say it's a wall. The problem is a wall that is 3 tefachim off of the floor is not a good wall because animals could just walk right under it. And so therefore it doesn't work according to either definition. And so that's no good. Covers the beam. And that's the definition we're going to see a lot of times, that if goats can pass under it, that's not called a wall. All right, good. Another law from the Tosefta, tenor abanan. Kora hayosea mikotel ze ve'ena nogat bekotel ze. Vechen shene shete korot, achat yosea mikotel ze ve'achat yosea mikotel ze ve'ena nogot zo bazo. If you have beam, okay, here's a picture. Okay, if you have a beam that goes from one edge, but it doesn't reach the other edge, or it starts from here and starts from here, but there's a gap in the middle. In either of those cases, if the gap is less than 3 tefachim, we apply the principle of lavud. We consider it as if it extends and the space is as if it's filled in. And so you don't have to bring any other material. But if it's 3 or more, then you do have to bring another beam. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, pachot me'arba, and tzarich lavi kora acheret. Arba, tzarich lavi kora acheret. Rashbag applies the law of lavud even up to 4 tefachim. So he's, well, in this case, it would be more lenient. We saw this machloket came up before. V'chen shete korot hamatimot, lo bazo kedei lekabel al ariach, ve'lo bazo kedei lekabel ariach. Im mekabelot ariach lerochbo tefach, and tzarich lavi kora acheret. That's this case here. If you have 2 beams, but each beam is very thin, well, if you space them apart, as long as it's spaced not less than 3 tefachim apart, so we say lavud, and if it's wide enough, in other words, 1 tefach at least, that it can hold a half a brick, then this is okay. So you can apply lavud both in this direction and in this direction. מקבל את הרחובות, ואין צריך להביא קורה אחרת. ואם לאו, צריך להביא קורה אחרת. Right. Okay. But if not, if it can't hold, if it's not enough to hold a tefach, then you have to bring yet another one. רבן שמעון בן גמליאל אומר, אם מקבל את אריח לאורכו שלו שעה, אין צריך להביא קורה אחרת. ואם לאו, צריך להביא Hora acharet. So remember, the Ashbag says that it has to be three. It has to have 3 hand breaths. So if it's 3 hand breaths, then between them, then you can apply lavud and it can hold it. Otherwise, not. Okay. Hayu achat lemala v'achat lemata. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda omer, ro'in et ha'alyona כאילו היא למטה ואת התחתונה כאילו היא למעלה, בלבד שלא תהא עליונה למעלה מ-20 אמה ותחתונה למטה מ-10. And I read this before, it reminded me. Hayu achat lemala v'achat lemata. Right. Okay. So this is a law that looks like this. So one is lower down and one is higher up. Right? They're on different levels. So that gets a little bit more complicated. And so the law is, we can imagine the upper one as if it's the same height as the lower one, or the lower one as if the same height as the upper one. So that's okay, it's kosher, as long as neither one is more than 20 amot high, and neither is less than 10 tefachim high. Because that, if you imagine both of them lower, then it'll be too low or too high. So as long as they're both within the range, you can imagine them being together. Amar Abaye, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Sabala Ke'abu Behada Ufalek Ale Behada. This is Rabbi Yosef said this in the name of his father, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the one in the Mishnah. The first Mishnah, he's the one that said even more than 20 is okay. And he's in this Mishnah here also. So he agrees with him in one thing, but disagrees with another matter. He says you do apply the principle of consideration. So in our Mishnah, you consider, even if it's made out of straw, you consider it as if it's made out of metal. And so in this law, you consider it as if it's the same height. And so you see, he agrees with his father that you apply that legal fiction. But he disagrees with his father because he said that both beams have to be under 20 amot. But his father said it can be even more than 20. So you see that he does not agree with his father's halacha in that regard. Okay, so now for Rabbi Yehuda himself, Rabbi Yehuda, as long as it's wide, it doesn't have to be strong enough to hold a brick. Matni le Rav Yehuda lechaya bar Rav Kameh de Rav lechaba afapi shena beri'ah. So this Mishnah was recited in front of Rav, and Rav corrected the reciter and said, Amale atneye rechaba ubri'ah. And he said, no, even according to the Yehuda, it has to be both wide and strong enough. So he disagreed with our version of the Mishnah. Wait, did Rav really say that? Because there's another statement of Rav where he says, if it's 4 tefachim wide, then even if it's not strong, it's still a good crossbeam. So see, that contradicts, because here he said it has to be strong enough to hold a brick, and here he said it doesn't have to be strong enough to hold a brick. So which one is it? The second halacha is talking about if it's 4 wide. When it's 4 tefachim wide, then it's already like almost a roof. And so it can be flimsy, and it will still be considered a good crossbeam. But if it's less than 4, it's only 3, then it has to be strong enough to hold the brick, according to everybody in Rav's opinion. All right, good. Hayta shel kash. It's made out of straw. We imagine as if it's made out of metal. My kamash malan. Wait, what is this teaching us? That we use a legal fiction and consider it as if? We just said that. We just said if it's wide enough, it doesn't matter what it's made out of, right? That's what the Yehuda just said. So what is this example coming to teach us? I might think that I only apply that principle with the same type of material. So if it's made out of weak kind of wood and it can't hold a brick, I would say, I'll consider it as if it's made out of a strong kind of wood. But I wouldn't jump from one type of material to another. And so the second clause in the Mishnah teaches that if it's made out of straw, I consider it as if it's made out of metal. And so I wouldn't know that just from Rabbi Yehuda's first statement. Okay, now the curved one. Akumar, takilu hi peshuta. If it's curved, we imagine as if it's straight. Peshita, obviously, no, because well, it's obvious because we're applying the legal fictions as we did before. Kamash malan kedebizera. כדל ביזרה, דאמר ביזרה, היא בתוך המבוי והקמים מותר חוץ למבוי. היא בתוך 20 והקמים מותר למעלה מ-20. היא למעלה מ-20 והקמים מותר למטה מ-10. רואים, כל שינוי יינטל הקמים מותר, ואין בין זה לזה 3, אין צריך להביא קורה אחרת, ואם לאו, צריך להביא קורה אחרת. Okay, it's not simply a case where it's just crooked like this, where, I mean, we saw, even if it's on 2 levels and all that, it's not simply that case. But rather, it's a case like this where it's crooked, and the crooked part of it is jutting out of the mavoy altogether, or it's jutting down, or lower than 10 tefachim, or higher. What if this is up at 20 amot, and this is now going higher than 20 amot, right? So the part that juts out is in an area where it's not allowed to be. So the law here teaches that if it's, as long as it's small enough that the place where it juts out is less than 3 tefachim, then it's as if it's not there altogether. And we can apply then lavud, and so just by jutting out doesn't make it any worse than being empty space. And if it was empty space, that would be fine. So a jut out is okay as long as the straight part is most of it and the jut out is 3 tefachim or less. That's what it's coming to teach us. Hold on, of course, isn't that obvious? I mean, if there's nothing there, it's okay. So if something there, isn't something better than nothing? Oh, we do need it because sometimes something could be worse than nothing. When this is here, and let's say you're walking and your eye looks and says, oh, it looks like the crossbeam ends over here, so you might think that the mavoy ends over there, and then you might carry outside because the mavoy, the korah, sticks out. So therefore, the Mishnah comes to teach us that even that is okay. You don't have to worry that people will do that, as long as it's small enough. That is still a kosher korah. They're using this pishita as an opportunity to think of more cases that wouldn't be obvious and wouldn't necessarily be included in the peshat of the Mishnah, but to come and include them as well, and therefore we can learn even more principles. Agula, here we go with the round one. We consider as if it's square. So why do I need to know this? I mean, this is like similar to the one that's crooked, right? Why are you teaching me this law as well? Actually, we only mention this case not because we need to know that. I mean, obviously it has a diameter of that's the right width. That should be okay. We actually only teaches this whole law just to teach us the law of the ratio of pi, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't know that. At least we wouldn't know it halachically. And so we learn it. We need the Mishnah for the last part that tells us it's a 3-to-1 ratio. Now, what is the source of it? Interestingly, they don't say the source is experimental or from Euclides geometry, but rather we are looking for a source from Tanakh. Right? Everything's in Tanakh. Let's see a source for this. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kera. Vayaseh Tayam Musak Ayaseh Be'amah V'Sefato Ad Sefato Agol Sabi V'Chamesh Be'amah Komato. Okay, and Sefer Melachim is describing the building of the Bet HaMikdash by Shlomo HaMelech. He has a big washing basin that was in the courtyard. It was gigantic, and it tells us exactly its dimensions. It was 5 amot high, and 30 amot around its circumference, and also at the beginning says and 10 amot was the diameter. So there you go. It says 10 is the diameter, and it says 30 is the circumference. There you go. A proof from Nevi'im that the circumference is 3 to 1 to the diameter. There you go. Hold on, this doesn't really work with this architecture because you have a lip, and the lip of it has some width in itself. And so we're assuming that the 10 amot is measuring from inside here, is measuring from inside to inside, but there is also an edge, and the edge takes up space. And so if you measure the outside of the edge, then there's going to be more. So that's a problem. It says that describes the brim was made like lily petals. So in other words, they came to be very thin at the edge. So that would be negligible. And this is we're going to need this end this pasuk in a minute, that it held 2,000 baths of water. We'll see how much that is. But the point is that the edge is very thin, just a tefach at the top. All right, but still, even a tefach is still something. Once you go all around, it will still change your calculation. Oh, when the circumference is from the inside edge, and that's why it's exactly 3 to 1. All right, I wonder if you take the outside edge, would that be then closer to exactly pi? All right, we could calculate that after. Tanya, Rabbi Chia, Yam she'asa Shlomo haya machazik 150 mikveh tahora. All right, now we're going to calculate the volume of this Solomon's yam, and he says that this held 150 mikvaot, right? The minimum of a mikveh. This had 150 times that. Okay, let's see. Mikedi mikveh kam mahave. We're going to need to do a little geometry and algebra. So take out your pens and pencils. Kam mahave 40 se'ah kedatanya rachas et besaro b'mayim b'mei mikveh kol besaro mayim shekol gufa ole bahen. Okay, Zav has to wash himself in water, not just any water, but in the mikveh, and gathered water. And it says kol besaro. That means that he has to be able to fit his entire body in the mikveh at once. Okay, and how big does a bath need to be so that one can immerse one's whole body on average? Amma al amma berum shalosh amot. Right, this is a very important source. We did see it before, that for calculating the minimum volume is 1 amma cubed, right? So 1.5 feet cubed, that would be the smallest. Okay, and so that's in this one is in a length measurement, and a volume measurement. It comes out to that the rabbis found that that's called also 40 se'ah. Where is Burum Shalosh? Yeah, 1 by 1 by 3. 3 cubed. 3 amot cubed. 3 cubed amot. 3 cubic amot. Yeah. Okay, good. 3 cubic amot, which is 40 se'ah. Okay, let's do a little pre-calculation, right? So, because we just said that this can hold 150 mikvaot. So how many cubic amot would that be? 450. How many se'ah would that be? 40 times 150. 40 se'ah. 6,000. Okay, so you got that. So a mikveh is 3 cubic amot, which would be, and that would mean that this pool of Shlomo has to be 450 cubic amot, and the mikveh is 40. Also, same. It's 40 se'ah in volume measure, which would be 6,000 se'ah in cubic. So that's what we have. This has to be. Now we have the dimensions of this, right? So let's do some calculation. Well, we said that this is 10 by 10 by 5, right? So imagine if it was square, how many cubic amot would that make? 500. You see the problem? That's 500, but we said 450. Kama havu lehu hamesh me'ah garmideh. This thing is 500. So now, how many mikvaot would that make? Litlat me'ah me'ah. But let's take we separate the 4/5 to 500 into 300 and 200. So we that with the 300 we make that could make 100 mikvaot. Leme'a vechamshin hamshin. Another 150 cubic amot would make another 50. Yeah, would make another 50 mikvaot. So all it needs to be is 450. It only needs to be 450, and this thing is 500. So in other words, it's too big. It's even more than 450, 150 mikvaot. Okay, that was all assuming that it's square, right? That it's a cube, but it's not. It's circular. That's if the top is square. But this is round. So round circle inscribed inside a square is going to be smaller in its volume. So how much smaller? A square is a quarter bigger than a circle, by which it means a 4-to-3 ratio. Okay, let's calculate.
Pi over 4, that's what I was saying before. It's like 3 to 4.
3 to 4, yes, exactly. Yeah. Right, because the volume of a rectangle cube, a rectangle in 3 dimensions, it would be pi 2r squared. 2r, right, is one side. Is, let's say r is the radius. So diameter would be 2r. So it's, okay, forget the depth, right? Just the plane that's on top would be length times width would be would be
pi r.
Just use pi d, pi times diameter
would be d squared, which is
not squared. 2 times 2.
No, now I'm doing that. Now I'm doing the square.
Oh.
Okay, but if I do the square, it's simply twice r squared, which is 4r squared. That's 4r squared. If the circle, the surface area of the circle is is pi r squared, and taking pi as 3, that's 3r squared, right? So a square is 4r squared, whereas a circle is 3r squared. So there you go, it's 4-to-3. Okay, I think the Talmud was actually clearer than me just now. Okay, so it's 4-to-3. So now, once you have that, so now we need 400 of the, what would have been 500 sa'ah if it was square. Now we need 400 of those to make 100, right? Because 400, 3/4 of 400 is 300. That makes 100 mikvaot. Le'me'ah, we have 100 left over. 100 left over. 4/3, 3/4 of it is 75. That only makes 25 mikvaot. That only makes 125 mikvaot. So you have a problem. Now it's too little. If the whole thing is circular, like, oh, we don't even have a picture of a whole circular one. Okay, if the whole thing is circular, then it only has 125. If the whole thing is square, then it has more than 150. And so you needed 150, right? Exactly. So we need to compromise as follows. Bulk, but didn't mean the bowl here. A cylinder, yeah, a cylinder all the way down. Yeah, right. I mean, even this part should be cylindrical. Yeah, this makes it look like the top is bigger than the bottom. So this is actually a better picture. Okay, so therefore we have to compromise as follows. Maybe part of it was square and part of it was circle. Okay. Well, we make the right. Okay. Tane Rami bar Yecheskel Yam Shasa Shalomo Shalosh Amot Tachtonot Merubaot Ushtayim Elionot Agulot. Okay, the bottom 3 tefachim out of the 5 were square, and the top were circular. And now we have the bottom would be 10 by 10 by 3 is 300, and the top is 10 by 10 times 3, right? Did I get that right? The top is as
The diameter is 10,
Diameter is 10.
so then it's 30, the circumference, and then the
2.
height.
10 times 2.
It's 60 volumes. If
Wait,
the
all right,
diameter.
let's follow the Talmud. Okay, wait. So so you have the 3 lower cubits is 300 seah, which is 100 baths, and the upper is a volume of 100 is a volume of 150, which would make 50 baths.
Mhm.
Is that right? Because 3/4. If let's say it was square, then it would be 100 times 100 times 2, which is 200. And because it's circular, 3/4 of 200, which is 150. Okay, so this is 300 and this is 150, and there you go. That makes 450 altogether, which is 3 times 150, right? And since a mikveh is 3 and this is 450, this is 150 times just a regular mikveh. All right, good. So that solves the problem. Nehi dipecha lama set amart desfato agol ketib ela ema hada. Now, and you can't say the opposite. You can't say the square part is on top and the circular part is on the bottom, because it says sefato. It says the edge, right? The rim was round, so certainly the round part has to be on top. So maybe it's only 1. Maybe the top is only 1. And the bottom is the square part is 4 and the round part is only 1. How do you know that it's 3 and 2? The second pasuk that we read says that it can hold 2,000 bats. This is I think is the root of the word bat. Bat kama havya shalosh sa'in. 1 bath is 3 se'ah. Oh, that makes it easy, because dichtib ma'asar bat min hakor, because a cord is 30 and the bat is a tenth of a cord, so there you go, it's 3. Davalu shita alfe geri ve. So if 1 bath is 3 se'ah and this is 2,000 bath, then that means 2,000 times 3, it makes 6,000 gerive, which is 6,000 cubic amot. And 6,000 cubic amot is exactly 150 mikvaot, right? That's what we calculated before. Okay, so good. So that confirms that this architecture is correct. It works out, but in cubic volume and volume measure as well. Right. Gerivet, yeah. Gerivet is the same as se'ah. Okay. Haketi machazik batim sheloshet alafim. We have one last problem in Divrei Yamim, when it's also describing Shlomo's yam that he created. It doesn't say 2,000, but rather 3,000. That is 3,000 se'ah, which is a contradiction between Melachim and Divrei Yamim, which happens. So now what are you going to do? Ahu legudsha. No, when it says 3,000, that means if it were dry goods, and in dry goods you have a barrel and you make a heaping teaspoon, a heaping barrel full. So the heaping part is measured as 1/3 of more than that which is inside, or rather a half more, right? So to make a 3-to-2 ratio. And so this is 3,000. When it says it's 3,000 amot, it's actually the same. It means it holds 2,000 amot inside and 3,000 amot if you piled it on as dry goods. Obviously, this is water, so even though it says 3,000, it still only holds 2,000, and so there's no contradiction between Melachim and Sefer and Divrei Yamim. Okay. Amar Abaye, Shema Amina Hai Gudsha Tilata Have. Now we learn from this that anytime you have a surplus of dry goods, it's that surplus is 1/3 of the entire contents. Utanan Name Shida Teva Midal Kaberet Hakash Vekaberet Hakanim Ubor Sefina Alexandrit. All of these very large containers. Afapi sheyesh lahen shulayim ven machazikot 40 se'ah belach shen korayim beyavesh tehorin. The law is that a very large container, generally any container, can become tameh if it's a container. But if it's very large and can't be moved when it's full, then it's too large to be called a movable vessel. And therefore, it cannot become tameh. How big is that? Well, big enough to hold 40 se'ah in liquid, which is 2 kod when it's dry, and 2 kod is 60 se'ah. So there you go, 60 dry is dry goods when it's heaped up is equal to 40 when it's flat, when it's liquid. And so this proves that there's a 3-to-2 ratio between something heaped up and something flat, and that helps resolve the contradiction. All right, so we completed that Mishnah.
Rabbi,
When you heap it up, well, it really depends on the shape of how wide it is. If it's very wide, you can heap up more. If it's a little tall and thin, you couldn't. Well, not only the thing that you're storing, also if you have a very wide, shallow dish, you can heap a lot on it, right? So I guess this is some kind of standard that of ratio that they had from height to width. Yeah, David.
Regarding the calculation of pi, the rabbis were exposed to the Greek, Greek.
The Greeks had a much more precise definition. It was known.
Archimedes is like 400 years before the Mishnah.
Yeah.
So it should have been. I'm assuming it should have been like public knowledge at that point for it to.
Yeah, and even just if you do it experimentally, you can see that it comes out. You just take a string, you'll see that it's more than 3.
So is there like a reason why the rabbis decided to just go by what it says in the Milachim, which is probably just an estimate but not accurate?
Yeah, because I think that for halachic purposes, the estimate is also fine. This is not precision machinery, right? This is just you just need it to be about that big. So it's 0.1 off. It was not important to them. I mean, the same thing with all their measurements. We are used to measurements being this exact. You have to go to the museum of weights and measures and go, find exactly what a foot is. They just put their foot down and said, okay, this is a foot, right? So I think in general, their measurements were more fluid.
And I might be off, I might not be yotze.
But pi is an endless number, so nobody ever made a perfect
And
circle.
and if they had to really write pi, they'd be able to. Then Daf Yomi would go on for infinity.
3.1 is very close to 3, and it's actually.
I think that they do say Elsewhere, I think they do have 3 and a 7th, which is
right. 22 over 7 is
right. Right. Okay. Very good. So next Mishnah, lechayayin she'ameru gevohan asara. So we dealt with the tefach. Now lechayayin she'ameru gevohan asara tefachim. Rochban oviyan kol shehu. The lechi, the side beam, the sidebar has to be at least 10 tefachim high, and its width can be anything, even just a very tiny bar. The Yosef Omer rochban shelosha tefachim. Yosef says it has to be 3 tefachim thick as well. Good. Now we have a question on the language, the lechayayin, because this is in plural. If we look back quickly at the Mishnah that we just learned together, scroll a bit. We cover a lot of ground. Says hakora she'amru. It doesn't say korot she'amru. It just says kora in singular. And yet here it says lechayayin. And when you say lechayayin, it should remind you of the language of Rabbi Eliezer, who said, I need lechayayin, I need 2 lechis, right? So that's the question. Lema tenan setama ke Rabbi Eliezer, is this setam Mishnah using the language of Rabbi Eliezer, indicating that halacha would be like Rabbi Eliezer? Tamar lechayayin ba'ainan. That's a good point. La ma lechayayin b'chayin da'alma. No, it doesn't mean that. It means in general, lechis. I'm talking about all lechis in the world. This is how big they are. Not although lechayim is actually is the dual form. Yeah. Right. So I'm talking about all the lechis. Oh, if so, it should be consistent. The previous Mishnah should have said korot, all cross beams, but that one had singular, and this one has plural. My korot alma over there, I would have said general korot. But it's not consistent. This is what it must mean over here. Right, kind of like what you said. The lechis that was subject to a machloket. Because over there are some that say you need 1, some say you need 2. So it says all the lechis. But korah, everyone agrees you only need one, so it was sufficient to say just one lechi. How much is anything? It sounds like a question in calculus. Even the string that you use to tie a coat. So in other words, even a string, sounds like this might be a kind of thick string. So maybe there is some minimum, not a micron then. Okay, Tana. If I make a lechi, I put a lechi over here in the middle of the depth, right in the middle of the mavoy, then I only have a half, I can only carry in this half, up to the lechi. I cannot carry in the front of it. Okay, that seems obvious. Peshita, rather say in the positive, he can carry in half of it. Well, that's the same thing, isn't it? That's also obvious. Now, I need to tell you that you can carry in this part because you might think that you might come to carry in the next part because you see it all kind of looks the same. So if you carry here, you might come to carry here. You might think that if it's in the middle, you're not allowed to carry at all in any event. Therefore, this teaching comes to say you are allowed to carry in this half, and you don't have to worry that one will then come to carry in the rest of it.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
When we talk about the lehi, it wasn't there a mahloket about the purpose of the lehi, if it's there for you to as a reminder, or if it's there to extend the wall.
Right.
Does that not have any effect on how we would, what we would require for the thickness? If it's so thin that I won't notice it, then according to him who says that it should be something that reminds you, then it shouldn't work at all.
Right. And the next stop, we're going to have a whole machloket regarding this and a lot of discussion. But I mean, you can argue it both ways because you could say, in order for it to be a wall, it has to have a beginning of some thickness, and then I can extend it imaginatively. Or you could say to be a sign has to have some thickness.
Connected.
What?
I imagine that the discussion of the description of the lehi should be related to
the
requirement.
The logic could work either way.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tana, all right. Tana, asa lechi lechasim avoy. Okay, yeah. Next one. Amarava. Asa lechi lemavoy vigbiho min hakarka shelo shetevachim. What if I made a lechi, but I raised it off the ground more than 3 tefachim, a kind of floating lechi up there? Or sheifligo min hakotel shelosha. Or if I put it away from the wall more than 3 tefachim. Right, if it's less than 3 tefachim, I would apply lavud, that's okay. But if it's more than 3 tefachim, it's kind of in the middle. Lo asabe lo kilum, that's no good. That's not called a lechi. Afilu Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel damar amrinan lavud, hane mila lemala, aval lemata, yavan davya mechisa, shegedim bokin ba, la ka'amar. When we say lavud, even the Shpag, who says you can say lavud up to 4, will not even apply that here, because when you say, yeah, that's interesting. Right, because when you say that lavud, even more than 3 up to 4, according to the Shpag, that's for a cross beam on top. You can use that. But in this case, let's say it's 3.9 higher. Even if you would apply lavud and imagine that it extends down, it's still you can't do that here because this has to be an imaginary mechisa. And as we said before, a wall that is 3 off the ground and the goats can pass under it is no good, is not a wall. And just can't tell me it's an imaginary wall because the goats are still passing under it. So you can't apply lavud if you actually need the space to be filled in. Only you can use it in other cases like horizontally, but not in this case. Okay, good. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Rochban Shelosha Tefachim. So Rabbi Yosef says it does have to have a width. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shemuel. En halacha ki Rabbi Yosef, lo bihilmeh, velo bilchayayin. Okay, so the lechi, that's this law. Rabbi Yosef was machmir and said you needed 3 tefachim, and he says, Shemuel says, no, that's not the halacha. Not only here, but also regarding brine. The law is that you're not allowed to make pickles on Shabbat. We saw the Masechet Shabbat. That's because it's similar to tanning, which you'd prepare a salt concoction, so you're not allowed to do that. However, there are chachamim that say you can make a little bit, right? Just enough to eat. You can prepare a little bit for as a dip, as dressing of brine. Now, the Yosef says, no, you can't even do that. So Shmuel says that's not the halacha. We don't follow him in either case. Rav Huna said to Rav Yosef. All this was said by Rav Yosef. Remember, Rav Yosef is a sage that in his old age, he unfortunately forgot the things that he taught. So his student Rav Huna is saying, hold on, you taught us regarding Hilmeh that we don't follow that en halacha ke Rabbi Yosef. But you never said the law regarding the width of the lechi, that we don't follow Rabbi Yosef. You never taught us that. So he answered, so what's the difference? Rabbi Yosef asked. We don't follow Rabbi Yosef for one law. We don't follow him for the other law either, right? Rabbi Yosef, against the majority, we don't follow him. The student said, Abuna said, no, I might think that the lechi is different because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi agrees with Rabbi Yosef and says it has to be a minimum of 3 tefachim. We saw this quoted earlier with that complicated case of the small courtyard and the big courtyard, and it has to be at least 3. We might think since Rabbi Yehuda Nasi agreed with him, maybe halacha would be like him, and therefore this is a chidush that you're telling us now that wouldn't be obvious from anything you taught before. Okay, so it kind of leaves it open-ended whether Rav Yosef actually had taught this or misremembered, but we'll discuss it further. So this version, this conversation has another version regarding different sages, but a similar conversation. That Rav said, "En halacha ke Rabbi Yosef lo b'hilmi v'lo b'lechayayin." Okay, so this is now in the name of Rav. That one is the name of Shemuel. Amale amart. So sometime later, Rav Yehuda was asked, "Did you really say that? Right? Did you actually say that?" Amalehu la. No, I didn't say that. So he changed his mind. Okay. So Amar Rava Elohim Amara Ugbirna la mineh. And he says, so Rava says he did teach that. I heard it from him. He definitely taught this law. In fact, at one point earlier he said we don't follow Rabbi Yosef halacha, but he changed his mind because there's another principle that Rabbi Yosef always has good reason whenever he said something, and therefore we follow Rabbi Yosef even against the majority, right? Because he had clear and straight reasoning. So because of that, he changed his mind, and we do follow halacha like Rabbi Yosef. All right, well, what's the conclusion? Okay, now what? You told me these confusing stories. What should we actually do? Famous line, go out and see what people do, right? If you don't know what the official halacha is, because the tradition is not clear, you go look what people do, what the custom is. And the halacha follows the custom. So that's an important principle that just the general practice that people follow can actually influence the official halacha that's in the books. This principle, go out and see what the people are doing, is applied in yet another case. If someone is drinking water because he is thirsty, what should he say? There's a machloket what you should say. So which one should we do? Should we say shakol boren nefashot? Go see what people are doing. When you go and see, you see that people say shakol before they drink and boren nefashot after they drink. But it sounds like in the original question, they thought that you say either this one or this one before you drink, right? That's what the Bitarfon meant. So what people actually do is they end up applying both in this way. And so it's the common practice that defines the halacha in these cases. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen v'amen.